everyone, to another podcast. Can't believe who we have on our platform. Trevor Hurst, lead singer of Econoline Crush. Now, Canadian rock band, everyone, even if you're, tuning in from the States or my audience tuning from elsewhere in the world, they're big. They're huge here in Canada. They're from Vancouver, and anybody who's been to Vancouver, and I've been to Vancouver, that's where they were formed. And they released 4 studio albums and studio EPs and are best known for their charting singles such as You Don't Know What It's Like, Home, Surefire, and All That You Are. And instead of just, telling you his life story, we don't need him anymore. Okay, Trevor, hi. Nice
Hi.
to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you very
you.
much. Thank you very much for being on the platform. Can you give us, I'd be interested in having just a little bit of a history of Econoline Crush, where it started, like when did you start getting into music? How did you find your band members? All the way from the beginning to, we're going to call the band Econoline Crush.
Well, okay, so I had moved out to Vancouver with a band from Winnipeg. Like, I'm originally from Manitoba, and I grew up in a farm in Manitoba, and I moved out to Winnipeg in I think 1991, and I moved out with a band called One Big Union out of Winnipeg. The band subsequently broke up, but I retained the management company that we got when we came out there, and so I moved to Seattle briefly, and this was just during that whole insane grunge scene. It was wild, man. Like, there was like so many A&R guys in Seattle running around looking for bands. And what was interesting too was, like, at the same time that grunge was taking off, so was industrial music. You had Ministry, Nine Inch Nails, My Life in the Thrill Kill Cult, Stabbing Westward,
Wow.
So it was an interesting time. So anyway, I was down there looking for another band, looking for new musicians, and there was a street paper called The Stranger, I believe. And in there was an ad from a guy in Vancouver, and it said, listed all these bands. Do you like this, 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 and this? And looking for a singer. And so I went back up to Vancouver from where I was hanging out in Seattle, and met up with a guy named Tom Ferris, who was the founding member of Mauve. And Mauve was the band that Network Records was started for before Skinny Puppy and all of that scene. So Tom and I started working on songs together. Tom didn't want to tour, but it was interesting because when we first started the band and we got the demo done, he had a lot of interest from this label in New York called East West Records. And we were sitting around, and it was back in the day of DATs, right? Like, you couldn't just like email anybody an MP3. It was DAT tape,
Yeah.
right? So we had this DAT tape of our demo, and we had to send it to New York. But we didn't have a name for the band. We had just been working and working. And we called FedEx to come pick it up. We were putting it in the thing, and we had to label the tape. And the FedEx guy showed up early, and he's standing in the doorway, and we're like, oh my God, we gotta name the band. And so all the guys were talking away. And I think it was Daniel Ramco. So he was from Edmonton. He was an original bass player. And Tom and myself, and I don't think Rob Morfitt, the guitar player, was there yet, and the drummer Greg Leask, I think was our original drummer, was there. And we're sitting around, and Dan's like, oh, well, can we call it this? And Tom wanted to call it Crush. And it was like, I said, man, there's gonna be 15 crushes in the world. And then we were like saying all these different things, and I said, and it was quiet, and the FedEx guy's like, dudes, I've got to go. And I said, I listened to all my music in my dad's van growing up, and it was in Econoline. How about Econoline Crush? We can always change it. Let's just go with that. What do you think? And the guys are like, whatever. And we wrote that on there, and that's basically how it became. But wait, it gets better. So then, when we get signed to Restless Records in America, I tell them that story, and they're like, yeah, no. That's not, well, we're going to get a publicist. So this publicist makes up this entire story, like that it's a drug that you take for eternal optimism in some French novel, and he gives it a name and just totally BS's the story. So in America down there was like this whole story about it, but it's actually just about the van that I rode around in as a teenager.
And that's great. So Econoline Crush. But do you think that if you had changed it, did you have a second name in mind?
I don't really know. Like that's one of the hardest things. I mean, if you ask any band, I think most bands have a hard time naming their band. Like it's a hard decision, right? Like, what do you call it? I don't think we really had a secondary name in mind. It was just that happened, and then we kind of moved on. Like for us, it was all about the music. It was all about being in the studio and creating this madness. So we didn't really worry too much about the name per se, which was weird, but we did.
Well, then you have the groups like, let's call ourselves Bare Naked Ladies, so we won't get any controversy. Oh, let's call ourselves Violent Femmes, so we won't get any controversy. Well,
Yeah, right.
there's no controversy with Econoline Crush, you know that, but at least you could keep that name.
Well,
Um,
it was interesting too when you do interviews in Europe because that isn't a vehicle over there. So people would be like, "What is this Ecoline Crush?" You know? Yeah,
yeah, well, they put the um, need for a vocalist in the Rocket in Seattle, and it
that's
was
it. The
placed
rocket.
by Chris Myers. But did they have another idea? Like how many lead singers did they see before they settled on you, or did you just say, "Oh, let's take you instead"?
Well, and that's funny you mentioned it. So it was Tom Ferris. Chris Myers was the original drummer. Um, it was Tom Ferris and Mauve that put the ad in, I believe. I don't know if they saw too many other vocalists. He claimed that he had auditioned a few, but I don't know how many. I honestly never really asked. So funny looking back on things like why wouldn't you ask that? But no, I just kind of like I just listened to music and went, oh man, I could do something with this, and we just got after it right away.
I know, and imagine if you didn't answer the ad, then songs like "You Don't Know What It's Like," "Home," "Surefire" would never existed. And if you didn't read the ad and you didn't go for it, what do you think you would have been doing today? Would you have probably got your own band? Would you be known as just a regular soloist? What do you think it would have been like if you just didn't see that ad?
Well, it's interesting because like I had auditioned for bands down uh, in Seattle, and Kelly Gray had a band that he was putting together. And Kelly Gray now, like he was a producer for Candlebox, and my management at the time was the management for Queensryche,
Wow.
and so there was a number of things. I'm sure I would have ended up in a band. I probably would have been, um, who knows, but it probably would have been more Seattle based because I really loved being in Seattle at that time. I loved the city. I love Vancouver too, but at the time in Seattle, it was crazy. Like when we were trying to put music, like a band together down there around myself, you'd put an ad in the Rocket, and it would be, guitar player from Atlanta, guitar player from Boise, guitar player from Charlotte. Like there was people coming from all over America to be part of that scene. It was amazing.
That's totally amazing. And they didn't have any problem with a Canadian joining an American band either.
No, not at all. I mean, for a lot of bands, Vancouver was one of their like first kind of, I don't know, accept places where they're accepted. Like if you look at the Chili Peppers, did a lot of gigs in Vancouver back in the day, right
Hmm.
before they kind of broke big time.
Yeah.
And it was and people love to come up because we had the good weed.
Which is now illegal, by the way. So you can get anywhere
Right?
now.
Like, yeah, like, but at the time, I mean, it was the place to come to get your pot, smoke some good pot. And Vancouver, it was a very laid back city in the early 90s. It wasn't as hustle and bustle as it is now. I mean, the Pacific Northwest as well was very easygoing. So the two cities worked really well together. I hung out with like the guys in this band Grunt Truck,
Hmm.
and we, I mean, it's hard to even you say it now, people, it's hard for them to believe, but I can remember going to the rehearsal space to pick up whatever, and in one room would be Alice in Chains, and the other room would be Soundgarden, and
Oh,
in the other room
wow.
would be Tad, or Grunt Truck, or
Gee.
somebody like that. Yeah, it's crazy.
So you didn't get a chance to meet Soundgarden or any of them?
Mm. Met the guys in Pearl Jam. Met the guys
Nice.
uh, in um, Lane's band there. I just said it a second ago. Alice in Chains. Um, and I'd see Kurt around. I never met
Mhm.
him, but I'd see him driving his Volvo around. Hung out with Hole. I knew the people in Hole. It's funny. I went to the OK Hotel, which was kind of a beat up venue down there, with the guys from Geffen Records to see this artist they were thinking of signing, and he had a big independent single at the time, and so he came in to play this artist, and he wanted to get during the day he auditioned a few people and he picked this guy to be his boombox guy. So he had a guy up there
Mm.
doing boombox. He had a bunch of Fisher Price toys, and most of the songs were funny. Played them on acoustic guitar, but he had one song that he played with background tracks, and that song was called "Loser," and that was Beck, and it was amazing. And the guy that did boombox for him ended up being the singer for the presidents of the United States of America.
Yeah, they have that song. I think it's called Peach. No, Peaches or something.
Yeah,
I believe.
peaches and she's lump, she's lump, she's
Yeah, that's
lump,
it. That's it.
and then millions of peaches, peaches for me. Yeah.
Yay, we get a show.
Yeah, so like I mean it was crazy, like the incestuousness of the scene, the tight scene, there was Mudhoney, there was all those bands that were on Sub Pop. It was amazing. Like you could go out every night and see a bunch of bands, and then bands that were already signed kind of viewed Seattle as a place they had to go to impress the audiences there, to kind of become the flavor of America in some ways, So the concerts seemed to take off as well. You could see Bad Religion and and then think about the Posies. There was Rainy, what was it
Oh,
called? Sunny
nice.
Day Real Estate, Green Apple Quick Step. There's amazing bands, amazing bands.
But you mentioned Beck Henson there. I'm just going, whoa, like? I always wonder what Beck's story was because he's so morose, the way he sings. I'm sort of like, this guy's got a story that put him in that spot. Wow, that's so. Why? So as soon as you had your people in your band, and that's after Myers left,
Yeah.
you signed a record deal with EMI Music Canada. Now we had another musician, and he was part of an '80s group called Night Stalker. And he was
Hmm.
telling me about the whole thing about how you sign the recording deal for millions. You don't get the millions. And to him, it wasn't even a good thing. It was a bad thing. Can you tell us what it was like when you signed for EMI Music Canada? Did you know what to expect? Did they provide what they said they would provide? Because you only signed with them after 26 shows. And how come you decided with EMI and no one else?
Well, we definitely had a lot of offers. EMI talked a good game. They were a big label in Canada at the time. I was a huge fan of um, Smashing Pumpkins and other acts that they had kind of
Mhm.
blown up on their sister labels, like Virgin and
Mhm.
then the history at Capitol Records in America. I thought we would easily land. I didn't understand the politics. And yeah, like it was a big record deal to some degree, but you don't really understand how it works. I mean, the lawyers explain it to you. It's interesting because as an artist, the art is such a big part of what it is that you do. The business side, not so much. And I think, my advice to anybody today is like, you got to really pay attention to the business side, even though it sucks and kind of feels gross and greasy. But I wish we would have. EMI didn't fulfill what they promised most of the time. And that's not to say that they didn't do a great job. The staff did the best they could, but they were hamstringed by a lot of
Mhm.
politics and egos and stupidity on the part
Yeah.
of the executives of the company. And I think our president Dean was a good guy. I don't think he understood our band completely. I think A&R didn't understand our band, and they went all in on the Tea Party and really ignored us. And for good reason. I mean, the Tea Party was a great band and is a great band, and I Mother Earth did great stuff as well. So we were kind of the redheaded stepchild, but we managed to pull stuff off. I think we did our best work when like Devil was made entirely without interference by EMI. They basically let us go do what we wanted because they were too busy doing other stuff. and so that allowed us to make a really good record without interference. And that's when we did our best work, was when they weren't sticking their nose in it.
Yeah, that's wow. I I don't know. I wonder. Do you think that? Oh, before I say anything, when you're mentioning those bands like Our Mother Earth, I was a fan of Our Lady Peace and Rain Maida for a while, and
Yeah.
Chantal Cheviachek, because they actually married, and he's got this kind of voice. Like everyone has a different voice. You have a different voice. Do you think that I digress there? Do you think that Ferris and Myers left the band at a wrong time, if they had known that you were going to sign with a label and be the group that you are? Or do you think they left because of infighting? Did they leave because they just didn't want to be known? Or like, what was the reason for Myers and Ferris leaving? Do you have a reason for that?
I think, well, Myers was, he was a drummer that was an amazing force within the band for cheerleading the band, but he wasn't able to kind of get to the places that we wanted to get to in terms of just, and I don't want to say it was music, he just was a different personality, I think, that didn't work. Tom, he really did not want to go through the ringer again. He'd been through the ringer with Mauve. He was like, I enjoy producing, I enjoy engineering. I don't think I want to go out there and tour and get my heart broken again. And that's valid. I mean, it truly is, because it is a hard process. You do a lot of stuff for not a lot of loot. There's a lot of like glory, but there's not a lot of money, and there's not a yeah, it's very different. Like, it's not what I expected. I don't regret a moment of it at all, but it is different than what you think it is from the outside looking in. You're up against it from the get-go. You're trying to pay back. They're taking you out for wonderful dinners. They're making, fancy videos and doing tremendous promo shoots, and you're paying for that, all of
Oh
it,
wow.
you know. And so that is something that you, at the time, you're like, wow, you look great. Yeah, we should. We paid $100,000 for that, like, yeah.
And
So
you don't even get that money back.
no, yeah, we never recouped on that EMI effort. And now EMI isn't even, when we started at EMI, there was probably 1,500 people working there. Now it doesn't even exist. Like,
I was going to ask you if EMI Music Canada was still around. I guess not.
no,
Oh,
Universal owns their catalog. Yeah,
do they?
Universal
Yeah.
Music. Yeah. Universal Music Group owns all the catalog. So there is no EMI anymore in Canada. And it's a
So,
shame, because it was a great big company, employed a lot of people.
so if somebody were to sign, they would sign with Universal now?
Yeah, but it's yeah, you'd sign to a Universal Music Group, or I think Sony still has a Canadian label. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Like, today, the whole paradigm has shifted, and I think, like, today you'd be better to self-finance, get really good distribution, and then if a major label came along, the only reason that you would sign with them, I think, the only reason I would, is that they would partner with you. I wouldn't do a deal like the way that the deals are done back in the day, where they sell a record for $10 and you get 20 cents. um i
Yeah.
would I would do a partnership with them, and
Mhm.
work with them, and hopefully what they would bring to it, like a major, would bring opportunities for syncs, opportunities for being in
Mhm.
parts of movies, and getting on, like, just using their muscle, basically,
Yeah.
and their relationships.
So that's interesting. Yeah. I heard a lot of people just like signing record deals, and yeah, at least you are where you are and you were able to get all these albums out. Can you
Yeah.
tell us when Greg Leask and Guitars Hack joined the band? And were they the first people that you had joined a band, or did you see other drummers and guitarists before Leask and Hack joined?
Our band's like process of hiring people and stuff was insanely nepotistic.
Mm.
Um, Hack was my girlfriend's sister's boyfriend, and Greg Gleesk was my roommate, and he was from the same small town as me.
Oh, really?
Purge, Manitoba. So they joined when we needed to fill out the roster to tour. And then when we started to progress, because I hate to say that somebody's like not professional enough or not like a
Mhm,
strong enough player, because that's not necessarily the case. But there's a complete package that you need to go
mhm.
and tour, and we needed a more professional lineup, and so that's why things changed, or people's like goals changed. Um, we were very driven, and I still am, to be the best band we could be and to have the best live performance that we can have. And I don't like to put out anything that's not as good as it can be. And so if somebody's half stepping it, or somebody's got other priorities, or things change in their world, that's cool. But this thing, had to be number one back then in your life. And if it wasn't, then you had to go.
Oh, man. Well,
I know, hardcore.
yeah. I know. In respect to the death of Ziggy Zigman, which was just last year, how does that affect? A friend always death of a friend or family member always affects you. But how did the death of Ziggy affect you as a band member, and how does it change the group's direction?
Wow. Um, it was and is, it leaves a giant hole in the band. It leaves he was my person to some degree. I worked with Rob Morfitt for a long time on guitar, and Daniel Remco on bass, and we were a pretty tight unit. And those two guys, when they left the band for different reasons, make different music, all that kind of stuff, Ziggy had joined and stayed with me through all of it. And he would come and go occasionally. Like, we've always kind of had this fluid sort of thing.
Hmm.
But Ziggy, um, there's nobody quite like that guy. Uh, he was a musical genius. He was a character beyond, like, it's hard to even, you can't put Ziggy in a box. He
Mm,
was, and for me, it was crushing.
yeah.
What's interesting though, how it's changed the band. Uh, I mean, he's there with us. It's hard to explain, but he isn't gone from our hearts or our minds ever. And every show we play, we think of him.
Hmm.
But it's also the fact that he actually, like, whether, I don't know what people believe, whatever, but I feel Zig around when I'm doing certain things. I find weird things in weird places, and I just know that he's somewhere nearby all the time. Um, we had a very close relationship, I feel anyway, and I felt like he was somebody I could always go to, talk to about any kind of topic, and I mean anything. But also musically, he was so unique. He was so, like, he used to call it on stage that he would do a freeform freak out. And I always loved egging him on, and playing. And we had so many practical jokes on the Alice Cooper tour, for example. He, wa- they had incredible catering. I mean, holy, their catering was like just whoa. So I would put chocolate chip cookies in Ziggy's suit pocket, and he'd go to reach for a pick and pull out a chocolate chip cookie. He'd be so mad, he'd wing it at me across the stage. And like, he just was such a, like, he was like this odd, like, what did he call, he'd always say, I'm a paradoxical dichotomy. But he just
Lots of
was,
memories.
yeah, man. Like, and I actually, it's so funny because Brent Fitz, drummer for Slash's Slash and the Conspirators or whatever, he played in our band for a while, and he's a good friend, and he's from Manitoba, and so we share that.
Mm.
And we were talking just yesterday about, he said some of his favorite tour memories and favorite things were being in a band with Ziggy and recording with Ziggy and playing with Ziggy, because he just was Ziggy. I mean, I don't even know how to explain it, but like, there's a huge hole, definitely. But his persona was so big that it carries through now, and it's like he's still with us, and the memories are still with us, and somehow the joy that he brought is still with us. And so, but yeah, when it went down, like, I was listening to the new record, at the mixing engineers studio, and I was crushed. And I mean, I haven't cried that hard since my
Yeah.
parents died, and I was destroyed. But I'm so grateful that I got to know him and be in a band with
Hmm.
him, and I wrote some great songs with him, and I know they were great because of what he did, because what he brought to it. So
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Usually band members usually are the ones that you miss the most. Charlie Watts from Rolling Stones, both of the Bee Gees. Now Barry's this last one standing. It's always like I remember, and it's gonna stick with you. But now that see, you're the only original member. Your current members now are David Smart, Troy Zach, Dan Garrison, but you have so many of these former members: Tom Ferris, Chris Myers, Daniel Remco, Robbie Morfitt. I'm thinking I'm counting 60 here.
yeah, oh
Like, what
yeah,
happened there? Like, why are you not the only band that just kind of over 20, 30 years switched members so many times? Because Rolling Stones has the same members and
yeah.
other groups have the same members. So
Right, but
what
it's,
happened
I
there, do you
mean,
think?
that's an iconic. Those are iconic bands. But if you look at like a lot of bands and a lot of, I think uh, they might change names or something. Like I just felt like um, this this Econoline Crush machine, just needed to keep going. I mean, it's been a band. We've been a band now since 1991. So, you look at that. That's a lot of years. And I think. Um, it wasn't like it's a toxic environment. I mean, at times I'm sure it might have been, but it was more about just we weren't afraid to make a change if the change needed to be. I think that there are some members that probably are bitter about things, but most of those people on that list,
Mhm.
I think, enjoyed their time in the band, and I think they went on to do great things on their own. And it was a difference of opinion or whatever. But I was blessed, and I feel blessed to have worked with all those guys. And there's guys you didn't like, you know, Robert Wagner is an amazing drummer, and he plays with Devin Townsend sometimes, and the bass player Don Binns from Sons of Freedom played on The Devil
Mm.
You Know and played with us for a while.
Wow.
Amazing guy, love him. And we've had other guys. We even had a guest run where Mondo from Poison Idea played guitar on our tour. Uh, it was a fluid thing. I think I never really realized that I would never really say that it was my band. But I guess in the end, it kind of was. But it was not an ego thing so much as it was just I'm the singer and kind of the front guy and the face of it. So I inherited the whole damn thing. But it always kind of was run sort of by this vision statement of trying to make exciting and new sounding music that incorporated elements of electronica, EDM, punk, rock, and pop. And I think just that was the guiding force behind the whole thing, was to try and be as new or as forward thinking as possible. And it's interesting because when we started out, people be like, you play with some backing tracks and you play with sequencers, and like that's not music. And now there's not a band out there that doesn't, so it's really interesting how things change. But I love it. I went away from it for a minute with my side thing called Hurst, but I really, at the end of the day, this is my passion. This music is who what represents me the most musically, and I feel like it fits the best.
Yes, definitely. And when you're thinking of bands that just suddenly just lose their members, I'm reminded of. Are you familiar with Brendan Urie from Planet at the Disco? He had so many of his band members leave that now he's considered to be Panic himself. So, was there ever a time that Econoline Crush would have just been you?
Oh yeah, like I mean, back when we got it back together in the early 2000s, it was just me for a while. But I never really said like, okay, Econoline Crush is Trevor Hurst, and that's the way it is. I always like sort of a collaborative effort, and the guys that you listed, like David Schwartz,
Mm-hmm.
Troy Zach, those two guys have been with me for 7 years, 8 years
Mm-hmm.
now. Like it's been a long time. So even longer than say the original guys that you listed, like Dan Uremko or Rob Morfitt, like they lasted longer than that. So and longer than our EMI deal.
Eric Static, Anest, Ken Fleming, Tom Christensen, Nico Quintal. Oh yeah.
Nico Quintal, like amazing drummer, amazing guy. He played after us. He played with Danko Jones. I think he's out in Montreal, selling or doing drum clinics and running his own restaurant. I mean, I've been very fortunate. The people that have been part of the band, part of my world, they all brought something to the table. They all brought a lesson that I learned from, and they taught me things about myself, and they taught me things about music. So, it's really kind of cool that I feel really fortunate. I feel really grateful that all these people came through the camp, and there's no regrets at all for who we had or how it worked.
Well, before we continue, we really appreciate it. Some music from Econoline Crush will be linked down below in the description so that you can take a listen. So when David Swart,
Swart.
Troy Swart,
David Swart, yeah.
David Swart, Troy Zach, Dan Garrison. Did they hear? Did they ever? I guess they knew who Econoline Crush was, and when
Oh
you
yeah.
had to teach them your catalog, how was that done? That they had to learn the entire catalog.
Well, I mean, we have like there's certain things in the catalog that you play live, and certain things that we haven't touched in a few years. We just go through the set, we rehearse. It's interesting because for Dan Garrison, the guitar player, he remembers going to Edge Fest in Calgary and like thinking he was going to die of heat stroke, and he says, and then you told them to give you the hose and you sprayed down the audience, and we were all relieved that you did that because we were so hot. I mean, like, so it's interesting, like they've gone from watching the band to being in the band. And I don't know, like for these guys, these great musicians that I work with today, it isn't hard for them to sit down and learn the songs and pick up the all the little various inflections and things. They're very talented musicians. And I think what's great too is that today it's a lot easier than it was when we started out as a band. With the digital formula, you can move the song and listen and just isolate a part and repeat it and do all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, we get together, we rehearse, we go over it a lot, and then we get out there and we play, and yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, I mean, obviously, like when they had to learn the song Affliction, look, you got there, I'm on the edge of something more than what I knew. I've traded my burdens for habits I can't cure. Lyrics like that, gather up my enemies, bring them to the tees, dancing in the circle as they crucify me. Like, who came up with those lyrics?
All the lyrics are mine throughout the thing.
Wow.
And I mean, that's about, addiction in Seattle and just feeling an outsider. I think like as a young adult, I didn't really know until much later in life that I was a person living with ADHD. So there's a lot that comes with that, and rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, and all these different things. So yeah, sometimes I felt persecuted, felt afflicted, and that's why the name of the record was Affliction. But I didn't know what we were afflicted with. Yeah, the songs are generally have been for the most part, just a autobiographical in some ways.
Can you give us an idea of your songwriting process? Like, how does it start? Do you do the melody and then the lyrics? Do you have the lyrics and then write the melody around it? Or do you just say, oh, Affliction, let's write a song called Affliction? Boom, 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 boom.
No, it's like I always say, it's you just have to be available and the songs come to you. What usually happens is people will come, musicians in the band will come with a riff or an idea or a chord progression. And the chord progression in and of itself will tell you what needs to be written. At least to me, it does. Like I often use, like, I think it's Beethoven's fifth or fourth. If you listen to that chord thing where it goes da 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 da, if you ask a little kid, you go da 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 da,
They'll
what's
know
gonna
what it
happen?
is. Yeah.
Well, they go, the bad guy's coming. The bad guy's coming. So like, I still am, and this is the thing that I'm so grateful for, is that I'm still musically, very much uneducated in terms of what chords work and blah blah blah. I go by the emotion that I pick up off of the chord progression and the tempo and the stuff that they play for me, and then I just wait for the melody and the lyrics to come. Then when I might get the melody first and phonetically sing sounds, and or maybe I get one line. Um, like for example, for the song "Home," I had that song for like weeks and weeks, and I had
Mm-hmm.
ideas for the melodies, but I didn't know what lyrics, and I didn't want to screw it up because I knew that I felt like there was something there in the music, but didn't know what to write for lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I this is the God's honest truth. I was living in this apartment on Victoria Street. I was walking down to Commercial Drive to get a Fresca. I was on just had one of those things where I needed a damn Fresca and I needed the Fresca now, and it was raining. And so as I'm walking down Venables to the corner store at Commercial and Venables for people from Vancouver, um, it was pouring rain, and a Sheltie had managed to get itself to the center of the road in rush hour, but it couldn't get back and forth to the other sides. And I thought, Jesus, this dog's going to get hit. And so I was like, well, somebody will come rescue it. No, nobody's going to rescue it. You got to rescue this damn dog. But I don't want to rescue this damn dog because, like, when I get it back to his apartment, he's going to stink. He's a long hair. He's, oh, man. Now you can't always pick the dog you find. Oh. So that became the first line of the song. You can't always pick the dog you find. Maybe I wasn't what you had in mind, but I can love you. I can love you. I can love you a lot.
Yeah.
And that's how it starts. So you never know.
No. Yeah, I've actually heard other people say that they got their lyrics, they went outside, they saw blue sky, they saw the clouds, they saw a dog or a cat, and they said, let's write a song around that. So you're right in that way as well. But I just want to digress for a bit. So to let you know that I noticed that that Don Binns, Ken Fleming, and then Tom Christensen, Eric Static and Nest from the band Collide.
He was just he played keyboards on the record. He was never a live performer in the band. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to mention, so bassist Yaremenko left the band during recording to join singer-songwriter Biff Naked, and we have her on the podcast next week. So that's kind of coincidental.
And Biff Naked is a fellow Manitoban as well.
Oh, information I can ask too. Awesome.
Yep. Dauphin, I believe. Yeah, watch, she'll go, I was never in Dauphin. But no, I think she actually was born there or from there. And then they moved from Winnipeg to Vancouver.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us about your first album. Like it was your EP. Sorry, I lost my
Purge.
Yeah, Purge.
Well,
so
that was something that we did independently because we wanted to force the record companies to kind of force their hands. It wasn't something that was done a lot back then, but we felt like we were getting a lot of interest, and we felt like, okay, let's go in and record something and see if somebody will pick it up. Because they were doing that a lot in America. They weren't doing it so much in Canada. And it's really interesting because I picked up a Vancouver Sun newspaper when I was getting some lunch, and in one of the entertainment sections there was a ad or an article about this producer from Manitoba, and I was like, well, there you go, man, that's a guy that you can relate to. And it was Dale Penner. And so I got a hold of Dale Penner, and we went into Mushroom Studios and made Purge, and it was our first EP. And what was interesting about Purge was we did a cover of a song by Killing Joke, who's one of my favorite bands, and the song was Psych. Now, in those days, there was no internet to look up the lyrics, and Killing Joke didn't have a songbook. So that's where my longtime friendship with Paul Raven of Killing Joke started, because he was working on a band with Mishi Me. What were they called? They had a single, One Life to Live, You Don't Like to Lead It, Ragadeth. And so he started Ragadeth in Toronto. And so my A&R department had his phone number. So I phoned Paul Raven. I said, what is he singing? Well, I don't know, mate. He's like Marble Mouth. So we went through the whole thing. and tried to figure out the lyrics to Psych together. And we became friends, and we were friends until he passed in while we were making Ignite. Actually, he passed during that time. But yeah, we were friends for a long time.
Wow, that's a great story. Um, I loved your song "Invincible" and your song "Sparkle and Shine."
Thank you.
Yeah, those were, um, and also "Home" you mentioned before, and "All That You Are."
Yeah.
If there was a another musician that you toured with, um, can you give us an idea of maybe who would you have wanted to tour with? Did
Wow.
you have
I
anybody in
would.
mind?
Well, I mean, if we could have toured with Killing Joke when Raven was in the band, that would have been wicked. Um, I I really enjoyed. I don't know if they would have had us on the bill, but I loved the Afghan Wigs. I thought that Greg Dooley was and is just amazing songwriter and singer and just all around like lunatic. Um, I love 9 Inch Nails. I would love to play shows with
Mm,
9 Inch Nails. Um, it's interesting though, the people that we did play with, and the bands that we did get to see in the Edge Fests and stuff, like, we did a lot of shows with Kiss, for example, in America and a few in Canada. And
wow.
as odd as Kiss and Econoline, the juxtaposition in a way,
Hmm.
Kiss taught us a lot about showmanship and taught us a lot about bravado and sort of almost gratuitous bravado. And I love that from them, because it was I remember having dinner with Gene Simmons and talking about music, and he's
It's
quite
amazing.
a he's quite a character, and I really enjoyed that experience. We played shows, a lot of dates with Alice Cooper, and talked with him and watched them play every night, and that was a very educational thing, just the whole theatrical aspect of things.
Mm,
um, and then our fellow Canadians playing shows with the Tea Party, playing shows with other Canadian bands. Sons of Freedom, huge influence. Like, I love that band, Sons of Freedom. I think they're great. I think if there was anybody in the world I wish I'd had time or was able to play shows with and spend time with, it would be David Bowie. Would have been David Bowie. Huge fan, and I love the fact that he challenged himself and changed his style and was unafraid of being an artist.
yeah, but not telling everyone that he was sick and ill with liver cancer and then dying. Like, I mean, don't you think rock stars should be open enough to tell them, their audience and their fans, what's going on instead of just leaving them like that? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we owe anybody any explanation for our behavior. We're artists. We do what we do. I think David didn't want a bunch of people feeling sorry for him. I don't know. I can't speak for him, but I don't think we every artist has to decide their relationship with their audience and with their public. And for me, I'm pretty open about a lot of things, but some artists just don't want that. And yeah, I don't think I would hold somebody accountable like that. I don't think that that's fair. I don't know what David was going through at the time. I don't know what his, you know, even Robbie Robertson. I don't know if people
Mm-hmm.
knew that he was ill or at all or was gonna pass away. Um, and that was somebody I got to meet once. And
Mm.
Robbie Robertson was cool as shit, man. Holy, he was like a gangster. Like, he was like, we played we played Vancouver. We played our song "All That You Are" at the Junos in Vancouver, live on television. It's hard to hear. It's very difficult. And at the party afterwards, he was like, "Hey, man, that ain't easy to do." Hey, and it was like one of those moments. And I mean, I've met a lot of different people that I really look up to and stuff. He was somebody that I was almost like unable to speak at first. I just didn't, because he was part of so many amazing
Mm-hmm.
transitions in music, and then that record's first solo record with Somewhere Down the Lazy River, that was just everywhere. It was so good and so big and so it sounded so great. And his ability to kind of create this movie-like
Mhm.
scene with its music was just stunning. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
Leonard Cohen too. Like, I mean, I never got to meet him, and I would love to have met Leonard Cohen. And you know, I don't think we could have done shows together, but it certainly would have been amazing to go on tour and watch him every night.
that's awesome. So I'm a tenor and I do a lot of opera, and I think mine, if I were to answer this question, would be like I would want to sing with Andrea Bocelli. I'd want to sing with Josh Groban. So
Yeah,
yeah, definitely, guy. Oh yes, yes, we all have our people we want to sing with.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so how did you deal with your mental health, and how did you manage the crazy schedule and how to cope with that? Example with 26 shows that you played, having to hang around with the band, the infighting, the emotional outbursts, if you had any, just fans ripping your clothes off, especially the girls. Like, how did you manage to deal with your mental health and your crazy schedule, your lifestyle due to performances, your constant work, your tours, all so much?
Yeah, well, it was when we first got signed, I quit drinking,
Mm,
um, and just did drugs. And
mm,
then uh, that was the my coping mechanism for a while was you know, cannabis and
mm,
some harder stuff, and then um, but for the most part, for me, I think that music was kind of like my religion. It was my safe place. It was my go-to religion. So it it seemed to come before everything else, thank goodness, you know. And that, no matter what was going on, no matter if people were losing it, I never wanted to forfeit the show. I never wanted to forfeit the performance due to drugs or due to mental health. Like, no matter what, the show must go on. So that saved me, I think, from a lot. And then it wasn't until quite late in life I discovered that I had, when I was went back to school, after like the music industry changed and EMI folded, we got dropped, and we made Ignite and did all that stuff. And then I got married and I had two kids. And I was getting divorced and I was worried I was going to lose my boys if I was on tour
wow.
constantly, you know. So I went back to school and became a psychiatric nurse. And it was when I was doing that that I realized that I had ADHD. And so getting that diagnosis changed my life, because then you realize that you're not, um, you know, for lack of a better phrase, a piece of shit. You just can't remember things sometimes. You can't focus on things sometimes. You can't feel the things that other people feel. And then rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where like just even the smallest slight just throws you into a deep depression because you just don't have any regulation of your emotions. I realized, oh, so I'm not like some precious front man. I'm actually somebody living with a mental illness. And that kind of let a lot of weight off my shoulders. But for the majority of my career, I think a lot of bad decisions or lack of confidence led to the band not doing and being bigger than as big as I think we could have been. Like, I feel like when I was working with Bruce Allen and stuff, I didn't have the wherewithal or the mental capacity to kind of combat his combativeness, and to be able to sort of insert myself into the conversation more, with more authority, so that the band, you know, so that I stood up for the band more. I kind of folded the tent because I felt like, well, this guy knows. I mean, look at him. He's a, you know, a very well, um, famous and big manager, and what do I know? And so it wasn't until much later, and then when I started working for this community, Chinupwapka Dakota Nation, my parents, one died, then the other parent died, and I was really in a funk. And it wasn't until then that I fully comprehended just what a privileged and blessed thing it was to have this gift from the creator to make music, and then also just to be who I am as a person, and what a gift it is to be given all the traits that I have, and to lighten up and to like
Hmm.
myself a bit more. And once you learn to like yourself, once you learn to love yourself unconditionally, everything changes. And I think that's something that artists, because most artists are sensitive people, most artists are people that are struggling with mental illness. This is why we, go into some dark basement and practice singing or guitar or whatever instrument you play for hours and hours and write these songs, because you don't really know how to express yourself any other way, or paint, or whatever it is that artists do. So when you kind of get the therapy that you need and the help that you need, you then become more understanding of yourself, and maybe you can give yourself a break, because a lot of artists, I think, are so hard on themselves and don't give themselves a break, and they end up you know um, dying by suicide, because they're just so overwhelmed with what they think is their faults. But I mean, if you could sit down with Chester Bennington, if you could just sit down with Chris Cornell, or
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Cobain, or
Mm-hmm.
any of these guys, and say, dude, like, I know it. You feel like you suck, but you don't suck. Like, you are amazing. You bring so many people joy, and you're not a sellout, and you're not whatever like that you think you are. You're absolutely amazing, and you were made exactly perfectly the way you're supposed to be, so that you could do this. So, I hate it when we lose people to suicide. It's terrible, and it's not like that didn't cross my mind, and I sure it crosses lots of artists' minds. Suicidal ideation comes into a lot of people's lives, but hopefully, there's enough information out there now, and there's people working all the time to try and get more information out there, that people understand that the reasons for the way they think sometimes are not their own fault. It's a number of complicating factors, and that this life here, as much of it sucks right now temporarily, it will get better.
I understand that, Trevor. Yeah, and you mentioned that you were a nurse. Like, don't you think there's more stress there than being a musician, a band member, a singer, even?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, like, why go into that? But I really like helping, and I really like the psychiatric nursing part. I like, because I know how painful it was for me not getting help for all those years, and how many nights I spent feeling like there was no reason to carry on. And I just really, 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 really don't want, people to suffer like that. So I could do my little part to help. And also, I wanted to understand, like, a lot of people go into psychiatric nursing and psychiatry and stuff because of their own mental illness or their family's mental illness, and they want to understand something better. So you go to school and learn it more so you can figure it out. And yeah, that's why I did it. That I mean, that, and the fact that, it was something that I could do, that there was a demand for it, and you could still make music. You could work shift work, or you could do whatever, and you could still go out and play shows. And it turned into be a beautiful thing. Like, my relationship, I currently work at Chinabwapka Dakota Nation in southwestern Manitoba, and I work in this small community, and I'm their community health and wellness nurse. And so I deal with counseling, and I help out in the nursing side of things, and it is very rewarding. I love my community. I love the Dakota people there, and yeah, it's something. We actually are finishing up a documentary about my work there. It's called Flatlander, and hopefully
Wow.
it'll come out in the spring of next year. And it's a story of how, when my mother died of cancer, I really didn't want to keep going, and I just started into psychiatric nursing school. And yeah, when she was diagnosed, and I was just really, really lost. And my relationship with that community um, brought me back and gave me hope and understanding, and a greater understanding of my, because I was an atheist, I think, for pretty much when I went there. But after getting involved in the culture, and going to sweats and stuff, I realized and was enlightened greatly by that experience. And it was, yes, it and is a wonderful thing to work with those people.
Yeah, I have a strong faith in Jesus myself. Consider me a Christian. Um, and we have something else in common, my friend, is my mother was diagnosed in 1993 of leukemia, and she passed away. And my dad passed away May 29, 2002. So he's been gone for like 21 years. And there were times when I like, how can I go on without him? How can I move on without him? And So with both my parents gone, with even the problems I had in my marriage and other issues, I'd love to pick up the phone, dial it, and say, "Hi, Dad." Yeah, and just talk to him, because he had this wonderful advice, and the advice he gave me, I could only use after he died, because there was some advice that wasn't pertinent to me at that time.
Yeah.
And now I can remember his voice. I can remember his advice, and it's just, yeah, you always miss them, but you have to go on. It's sort of like, when he died, I didn't have my license. I wasn't married. I didn't have a job. Now that I have my license, I have a job. I have everything going for me. I wish I could pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I got everything that you said I would have. I just didn't have it then, but I do have it now." And I miss that.
Hey, and it's what's interesting though, like I um I have this sort of different approach to my faith, and I feel like I feel them around me. I feel like they're here with us. I feel like their memories, the lessons that they taught us when we were younger, and the memories, they come back at the times we need them to come back. That it's part of who we are. They're part of who we are now, and their strength, we draw on that. Hopefully we're able to draw on that to carry on, and that's important. And it's it's all part of the human experience. This is a very interesting thing, being a human being and living life and getting through it all. And that's why, being an artist is a blessing, and it's a very fortunate thing to be able to write songs and try and share some thoughts, and try and engage with the audience, and have, like, today's audience has more access to their musicians and their other artists than ever before, and so you kind of can get share more. And I'm not sure all this is about, but I kind of think, the currency is experiences, the currency is stories, and I just try to go forward with as much love as possible. I try to be live in the light, and stay out of the dark, and be um, as positive, and as caring as possible, and as kind as possible, because there's lots of mean people out there. We don't need any more. So I think, it's good to be kind. It's good to have some compassion, and I know that that's what my mother and father would have wanted from me, was to be a good fella, as they used to say, and try and be kind to others, and do what you can to help out. And that's part of the prairie ethos too, like, just to be that, because in Manitoba, where I grew up, on a farm and stuff, you could get into the ditch in the wintertime, and you can't drive by somebody in the ditch in Manitoba. If you got to go get out of your car, and you got to dig them out, and you got to help them, because that's how we survive the winters, and that's how we survive living in the prairies. And I think when you bring that forward to urban living and stuff, and don't look the other way, um, it's a valuable thing. And I think that's what's going to get us through these next turbulent decades, is compassion, caring, and not being heartless and cruel. I mean, the materialistic side of things, that people get caught up in it, but it really doesn't. You can't take that with you, man. And the memories, and the experiences, and the compassion, and the interactions that you have with other human beings, that is logged in that bank of life, and that's the stuff that matters. And if people can get their head around that, I think the world would be a better place.
I totally agree with you, Trevor. So I guess you've had plenty of stories. I don't want to call it the psychiatric ward, but let's say plenty of stories as a psychiatric nurse, from people
Yeah.
who you tried to help and say, "Hey, aren't you Trevor Hurst from Econoline Crush?"
Well, what's interesting is, when I've done, this is my second stint at Chinook. When my daughter was born, I took a leave to help raise her, and I didn't
Mhm.
go back for 4 years, I guess. I never told anybody I was a musician, and
Mhm.
I didn't look like myself, actually, to some degree, because I had really long hair for a long time. And if anybody did figure it out, I would swear them to secrecy, because I
Mm.
wanted to be as authentic as possible when I was working there. I didn't want to have this sort of special treatment, or any kind of differential treatment. I just wanted to be, Trevor, the home and community care nurse was my job at the time. And yeah, now, you know, they do know. And but I think it's kind of cool, like being a musician, being an artist, you fit into a lot of different places, and you can speak to a lot of different people, and it gives you an opportunity to cross a lot of boundaries that other people aren't allowed in. And I think I missed it maybe the first time around, because taking in that and using it to my advantage, not in a way that helps me, but it helps the community. I try and, you know, pull favors and do certain things, and use that to better the community, and make my job maybe a bit more relatable, or my experiences more relatable to the people, so that they understand that I can empathize, and that I obviously I cannot, you know, replicate or completely understand someone else's life experience, but that I have lived a full life, that I have had tremendous disappointments, that I've had tremendous loss, and I've had tremendous wins and great experiences. So I've had the full gamut. So I'm able to empathize, and I'm able, hopefully, to come up with some possible solutions or ideas of places they can look to get solutions, because ultimately people live their own lives, you know, and they have to create their own future. But as a psychiatric nurse, our role is to help illuminate those places you could go, or those lifestyles you could lead, that might make your life a little bit easier and a little bit healthier. And, you know, I can't tell you how to live your life, but I can tell you these are some things that might work to create less friction or less pain in your world.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like when you mentioned about if someone did figure it out, I would ask them to sworn to secrecy. I think I would do the same thing if I met you or somebody and you told me who you were, and I say, okay, sworn to secrecy. I've actually had that instance, and I am still secretive about a certain person that doesn't want me to tell them who they are. But yeah, it's you're one of those authentic musicians, one of those authentic people that, you know, it's not like I remember I was down Toronto with my one of my groups, and lo and behold, up the street you have Goldie Hawn, and she's walking towards you, and she's going, "Hi, everyone," and everyone's ignoring her, and they're, "Hey, it's me, Goldie Hawn." I mean, like, why? Because we didn't recognize you? I thought you wanted us to know that you're in Toronto. So where's Kurt? Is he anywhere we can talk? You know? So something like that, I don't think. I mean, like, I think it's a good thing that nobody knows who you are, because then you have all these people over and say, "Can I have an autograph? Can I get free concert tickets? Can I meet you after?" You know, all this stuff. You don't want that. But it was funny.
No,
Hi, I'm Goldie Hawn.
yeah. But I think also too, like, if you, I remember when we first started and they were talking about press, and we were like, our manager or whoever was working with us at the time was like, how come we're not getting more press, or how come Trevor's not doing whatever? Well, he has no story. He has no this, no that. And A&R departments, you know, people that are responsible for sort of molding and shaping careers, sometimes their concepts and their ideas are so sideways, and you know, creating this persona, like, hey, Marilyn Manson does great. I think his
Mhm.
music is fantastic. He's a great artist. But, you know, it must be tiring for Brian Warner to be Marilyn Manson all the time.
Mhm.
Where I find it a lot easier to just be authentic. It makes life a lot easier. It makes writing songs, doing press, just the whole damn thing is a lot easier when you're just honest and yourself. And I understand why people put on a persona, because it's protective in a way. It's like kind of putting on the suit. You go out, and definitely there's a Trevor that is on stage, and there's a Trevor that's off the stage. There's a Trevor that's public, and there's a Trevor that's private. But
Mhm.
I mean, just in terms of authenticity and what you do and how you present yourself, um, I just prefer to run my career that way. It's just, that's for me is the easiest way to do it. It's not because I think that I'm right or somebody else is wrong, but for
Mhm.
me, it's personally, it's just easier to be, you know, you don't have to keep this storyline running in the back of your head that, you know, I'm from Mars and I do this, and you know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And talking about Mars, man, remember that book "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus" by John
Yeah,
Gray? And
yeah, yeah.
I bet you anytime John Gray becomes just John Gray, the regular person walking down the street, and someone says, "Hey, Men are from Mars. You look at
Yeah.
today, you don't want to be noticed and you want to be recognizable. But people like, when was it that Kiss, when they took their makeup off, that people knew who they were with their makeup off,
Yeah.
So, but everyone knows who they are, with like Gene Simmons and Eric Carr passed away, but I believe Peter Criss is another one. But who's the main one that likes to stay in the limelight?
Paul Stanley. I think
Yeah,
Gene is the one that Gene
Gene
Simmons is the
Simmons.
one that,
Yeah.
yeah. And Gene is a rock star. But see, Gene is a rock star authentically through and through. But
Mm-hmm.
his public persona and his private persona are a little bit different. Like when you're with him privately, um, at least around me, and I can't say what other people's experiences are, but I found him to be very empathetic and very kind, and I bet he's a great dad and all that. He does have some quirks, but yeah, he's an interesting man, and I enjoyed all the time that I spent with that band. Boy, that's some of the funnest touring I've ever done, is playing shows with Kiss and just watching them, watching the audience.
Yeah.
Winning over the Kiss audience is not an easy thing, and those were great experiences. I really like I yeah, some of the favorite touring experiences.
Do you think that do you think Alice Cooper? Do you think his own mother's called him Alice? Or do you think Vincent?
I think she called him Vincent. It's funny, Alice has, like, when we played with him, and even still, like, his wife is part of the show, his daughter Calico is part of the show. Um, it's a family thing, and he's very much it's an act, but it's different than Marilyn Manson. I think Marilyn Manson tries to be that publicly off the stage as well. But when you see, Vincent in the morning, when he's going to golf at 7 in the morning every day. That we're on tour, and he's just a guy that a very
Mhm.
kind and well-spoken man, very intelligent, very very intelligent. Yeah, I really like him. He's a good guy.
That's awesome, Trevor. We want to be respectful to your time, so I have two great questions for you for the closer. You ready for these?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. The first one is now you Econoline Crush and rapper Cardinal Offishall, which is totally like two different genres. Like, I don't know how they
Yeah,
fit together. You
yeah,
supported Godsmack on a tour.
yeah.
So why weren't you not warmly received by the heavy metal crowd?
Well, Godsmack's crowd is. I never got along very well with Sully, the singer. He's yeah, and Cardinal. I really thought Cardinal, and still to this day think he's an incredible artist. And I was really grateful that I got to be on tour with him and play shows with him. I think Cardinal Official is just like, holy, he's amazing. But Godsmack's crowd is just really kind of a narrow strip of that kind of music, and for whatever reason their audience is just, I think, closed-minded and incredibly ignorant to that. And that's not to say that their audience isn't cool and stuff, but they're just, at that time, whatever, in history when we played, it was not um, the worst or the best experience. It was just an experience. Although I thought we did really well opening for them. I think Cardinal had a tougher time because of his genre of music was so different. We at least could play our stuff that was heavier and kind of fit in. But again, it's just it's sort of the culture of Godsmack and the culture of their fan base. He cultivates kind of a hateful kind of vibe, and a dark and depressed kind of vibe, and
Mhm.
that's just his thing. Some people like that. I just don't think that was our vibe or Cardinals vibe.
Wow, that's amazing. Now for this question, I want to hear the answer coming out of the lips of Trevor Hurst here. So, what is the current state of the music industry, and what do you think of AI? Like the whole issue with the SAG and the after strike, it's because one part of it is that they don't want to have a body scan, which means that you can use AI to put an actor in a movie, and they're not even in a movie; it's just an AI version. So, what about cloning the voice? Like, what if there was an Econoline Crush song that came out with your voice, but it wasn't you? What do you think of the whole AI issue?
Well, there's something there that it's a very complicated issue because, like, for me, the idea that you could say take and create some sort of artificial version of myself, if that would be compensated the same way I would be as a human being after I'm gone, and my family could benefit from that, I'm all for it. And if it helps alleviate some of the, the people wanting to hear that music, and I'm not creating it, and they want to hear it, I think that's fine. What bothers me is if they do it and they're not compensated. I think that it's very scary in terms of deep fakes and stuff where you could have
Mm-hmm.
political leaders mimicked, and then they say, well, that's it, we're going to push the button, the nuclear war, and all of a sudden he didn't say it, and all hell breaks loose. As for the state of the music industry, I think it is amazing. I think that what we hear in the press and what we hear from the music industry, well, yeah, you guys were at the trough for all these years, making tons of money off the backs of us, innocent young youth and artists, and you love the all of the stuff on the side that you got to experience being an executive at a record company, getting enormous salaries and running around chasing girls and being idiots. You didn't, however, you're like dinosaurs, you're extinct, and you have to either evolve or get out of the way. And I think the music industry is in great shape in terms of, like, yeah, the streaming services, absolutely abomination on, the music business. I mean, getting the tiny amount of money that we get for what we put into a streaming service and what we put into the songs. But having said that, it does get our music out to a lot of different audiences. It's just getting your head around what is going to be the new paradigm and how are we going to monetize what we do
Mm-hmm.
in a way that allows us to make a living. That's the big thing. And it's how do we monetize that? How do we make it work for us so that as an artist you can create? And so there's things about, like, there was a lot more control back in the day by the record company because we couldn't go and buy 2-inch tape and get into a studio and get all the gear that we needed to make a record. Now you can make a record at home in your
Mm-hmm.
basement and it can sound really good. You can do a music video on your phone and it can look really good. All that's needed is an incredible imagination and incredible creativity. Um, what they still have a hold of in terms of the business side of things is the pathway to market. They've still kind of got the lock on that, how you get and where it gets played and how you get to the people.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still create that on platforms using creative means. So I think that the music industry is different but healthy in its own way, in a new and different way. And it's a weird phrase, right? Music industry, because, like, what does that
Yeah.
mean? Like, if it means the people in the suits making the money, pushing the paperwork around, then yeah, maybe there's some concern. But if it means artistry and the music creativity and the
Mm-hmm.
state of music in and of itself, oh my gosh, like, it's fantastic. Like, there's so much new music out there. There's so much creative stuff going on. And like, it doesn't matter what kind of music you like, you can find it. Like, if you like people hitting pots and singing in their shower, I'm sure you could find probably 10 albums of people hitting pots singing in their shower. If you like opera music, I'm sure you can find lots of opera music. I think if you like metal music, you can find lots of metal music. It's just going down the rabbit hole and searching it out, and if they've put it up on the line somewhere, somebody will find it. um, so I think that's great. I think it's kind of difficult sometimes sifting through it all, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where guys like you come in with podcasts and bringing attention to certain acts and
Yeah.
going, here's something you should listen to, right? Here's something
Mm-hmm.
that here's an artist you might want to go down a rabbit hole with and investigate. And hopefully a few people maybe that have never heard of Econoline Crush will go down the Econoline Crush rabbit hole and go, wow, look at this. This is something
Oh
I like.
yeah.
So so I mean, I don't know. I do think though that the music industry could have done things back in the day when it first started to switch over with when they were first sharing and music sharing and all that file sharing and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they that but it is where it is now, and we have to live with what's happening now. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the future of music. I still think that music is a viable art form, and it's an exciting art form, and it's something that that's going to be here forever. It's magic. Music is magic, man. Like it really is.
I don't know. It's just because of the whole issue that one time when Natalie Cole put herself in the video with her father, Nat King Cole, and a lot of controversy around that, saying, "Why are you doing that?" Well, he's my father. Yeah, but musically, there's implications. There's lawyers involved. That she doesn't own the rights to. So it's sort of like if you wanted to have Elvis Presley in one of your songs, who are you going to
But
go
those
to?
right, but those okay, but that's again, that's going to like that's so that ain't the artist that's causing those problems. That's the lawyers. That's the music industry. And so if yeah, somebody will own the rights. I think it's that Kino girl, Priscilla's daughter, owns the rights to Elvis and Elvis Presley. And so if they do an AI of Elvis Presley, then you have to go to her or whoever manages his estate and say, I would like to have Elvis Presley in my video, just as if he was alive. And you go, okay, Elvis, or if I want Brian Adams in my video, I got to phone up Bruce and I got to say, hey, I want Brian in my video. Bruce is like X amount of dollars, and I pay that, or I don't have Brian in my video. That's the way it works. I mean, you want me to go play your backyard barbecue? You got to pay me enough money to get there, put my equipment up, and
Mm-hmm.
play. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that part of it is fine. I don't. It's just sort of that the guys, the suits, and the lawyers can sometimes dubiously grab like with that Scooter Braun and kind of pulling some sort of slimy move to steal Taylor Swift back catalog. Um,
Mm.
and then it backfires on him because she goes and records it. Like, let me just say, Taylor Swift is like the smartest kind of like, whether you like her music or not or whatever. She is a serious gangster. She knows what she's doing and she is killing it. And I'm so happy for her because they tried to crush her and they tried to like paper over her back catalog and paper over her career with a bunch of business jib jab. And she's powered through. And I think that's important too. Like artists have to have control of their catalogs. These labels had, we had clauses in there. It was like, for the world and the universe, like just in case they wanted to be able to make money off us if there was a market on the moon someday. They had their ass covered, and they exploited us for a lot of years, artists, and they continued to do so. So I don't know. I think that having AI and having it revert to the artist, I just wish a lot of stuff reverted back to the artist over time, so that you got
Yeah.
your catalog back, so you were able to sell it, so your family would benefit from it. Like I'd love to be able to like it's this your what do you call it? Your art your there's a phrase for it now they use in film and stuff, but it's like my create the stuff that I've created. I wish that body of work I could leave to my children instead of having to like do some sort of like legal thing to get it out of the
Mm-hmm.
hands of EMI. Like I've asked EMI if I can buy my or Universal if I can buy my back catalog now. First you ask the question, how's the back catalog doing? How's it selling? Nah, not really. Well, could I buy it off you? No.
Really?
Yeah. So you're like, why it's just this serfdom. We're like serfs, and just it's really ridiculous. And I think like over time, like that's got to change. Hopefully it does in the next little while, but with all this people recording at home and hopefully learning from the past mistakes of the past artists, that they'll structure their deals better and get things organized better for themselves. But the lure of fame and fortune and all that tends to sometimes suspend disbelief.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake that Sting sold his whole entire catalog for 300 million. I really think it's a mistake because someday somebody's going to be, releasing a song. It's going to have Sting's voice, and he's going to say, "What? What? I didn't sing in that song." So there's where the implications are, and big trouble.
Well, he's at the end of his life, I think. Like, not like, like he's looking at the latter part of his life, I should say. So, like, for him, getting that cash up front might have been a way for him to invest in some other things or to start some other creative projects. So, again, I don't know what his thought process is, but I think, he's got to have had some great legal advice, and there's probably all kinds of clauses in there that protect him. I hope, and I'm sure he's not a dumb guy. And I think what they're trying to do, what people are trying to do that are selling their catalogs like that, they're wanting to have that capital right now in order to start other projects, whether it's a movie or a film house or their own label or whatever. So I don't begrudge anybody that does it. I think it's everybody has their own situations. I don't know what's going on in his world,
Thank you, Trevor. Really, really wonderful to be on the podcast today. It's excellent. Everyone, Econoline Crush's lead singer, Trevor Hurst, Canadian rock band, all the way from Vancouver. Really appreciate you being on the podcast, and really thank you for that. Really appreciate that.
Not a
Thanks,
problem.
Trevor.
No
Thank you
problem.
very much. Thank you.
No,
Thank you,
no,
Trevor.
no
Really
problem.
appreciate it. Okay,
Thanks for
bye,
having
guys.
me anytime.
You're very
Bye.
welcome.